this sparks concept comes from Search Institute out of Minnesota, and they've studied like the 40 assets kids need to move forward. And then this Peter Benson took it into these sparks. And so, but as I was thinking about it this week, it's like, wow, this is so, like, I love the idea so much, but I don't know, like when I started thinking about it, even if you read this, I don't know, it's hard to tell what I'm arguing against per se. And I will say just in general, what I think I'm fighting with is hopelessness. Like that's my biggest, what I would like to see go away. And, sadly, depression leads to hopelessness and despair. Anxiety leads to hopelessness and despair. Trauma leads to hopelessness and despair. And it's just, there's just too many pathways to it. And so all of this, hey, Grant? Hello. If somebody else shows up in person, I will have to ask one of the couples to share. But I literally never have any idea who's going to come, what's going to come. And then the other thing that I really wrestle with is the existential questions. So not only do we have all these negative paths of trauma, despair, anxiety, biological stuff, I mean, even throw in divorce and abandonment issues, all leading to hopelessness and despair. Literally the existential questions of what's the point, why bother, where do I even fit in this world? So even coming at it from a positive angle, you can just run into this wall of there is no point. There's nothing. And so trying to, this is what we do. All of my talks and slides end up getting used in multiple different places. And I'm going to come back to that one now. So existentialism, like I dug into, if you actually ask that question, what's the purpose, and you go just as deep as you can, and that's what philosophers. And the first is suicide, which is essentially complete control. It ends all questions. And, luckily, sadly, kids just read enough to get to the suicide part. They don't dig further into the philosophers to realize they all just discount this as not a meaningful way to be in the world. But then there's defiance. So actively fighting for control against external authority, institution, conventionalisms. And you see this, you see people that are just angry. They are just fighting everything. And they're hard to work with. I mean, in groups and things like that, because they're just like, I trust nothing. And so I'm just going to be defiant because, quite frankly, that's better than being dead. And so you can see it as a reasonable way to actually answer the. Like, is that you? Okay. Yeah. We have a car dealership across the street, and every once in a while, when they're really busy, we can get there like, so come to the. Whatever. And then the third answer is faith. And I would argue wonder fits into there too. Acceptance of less control because something hoped for in, and there's three broad categories. The faith is not just a like church spiritual thing. You can have faith in yourself. All right. And so hedonism is, I believe I deserve what I get or what I want, and I go get it. I think there's an argument made to be right now that our young people, all the identity crisis that I see out there has a little bit to do with they don't have faith in institutions, because who of us do anymore? And they don't have faith in, like, in some cases, even their parents, especially if something's happened to them, or other people. And so they end up like, this needs to be in myself or in my peers. And that's, like, well, and if my peers happen to, I don't know, let's just like cats, I'm going to like cats because I want a place to be. And so that is a faith in yourself. There's faith in ethics, just that you're going to follow rules. And this is not like a set of, but this is like saying, this is kind of the so I have at least faith that the United States is stable enough for me to get by, and that there are ethics and I can follow the rules and those kind of things. And then finally, there's a higher authority, usually connected to a faith and tradition. And so I just want to set up, those are kind of like, kids don't typically go down that far in it, but that's where that faith part just doesn't quite make sense to them. And you could call it attachment. Like, so with my 4-year-old that we adopted, there has now grown a faith that we are an okay household and that we're going to show up. All right. The 6.5-year-old has not gotten to that point. So their faith is in themselves. And that's a survival mode. I mean, and they have justifiable reasons. But does that make sense? I mean, so that is a faith. It's a faith in themselves right now and that they can take care of it. And not yet in us as parents. And so in this, you've been through orientation, but it really strikes me that when they did, they were doing 1,800 suicide screenings a year at Children's Mercy Hospital. And these were like, they would say almost every single one of those kids fit into one of these categories, if not more than one. So not having meaningful connections in their life, anxiety, depression, disorder, eating disorders, the whole gender identity questions, family conflict, or the purpose life existential questions. And so with that, I just want to set it up and put it into our model. So engaging the discoverer is confronting these defenses that are interfering with your life and finding new ways, to interact with the world. And I would argue that requires igniting some of these sparks that we're going to talk about, because that moves you towards the things that matter. And so just put it in the framework of what we talked about. So this is a lesson it's not quite made it to the 5-week kind of thing, but it's getting closer and closer as I figure out how to do it, because it's just so, I just think this igniting sparks concept is super important. Make sure I don't have anybody else joining us. So this is kind of when we're going to flip into, so that is what I'm arguing against here, and what I think sparks are the answers for. All right, and so sparks are, this is Peter Benson's language, but they're hidden flames in all of us that excite and tap into our true passions. Different flavors. And it's I've been thinking about it. I'm like, it doesn't even have to, like, you can be good at things that you're not necessarily motivated to do just yet. Turns out from an early age, I was a pretty good speaker. It was never really a desire to speak in front of people. It was just like that had to happen to do the next thing. But it was a skill that people pointed out to me earlier on, before I thought it was a skill. Something we care deeply about: environment, animals, helping people or serving, a quality that we know is special, such as caring, listening, empathy, or being a friend. I've got one that just joined, let's say this week, and super compassionate, but it's leading them to be hanging out with people that are struggling. And so their whole group of friends are all struggling, and they're not, and they are struggling. It's just not a good combination when none of them are solid enough to give strength when strength needs to be given. And so that's one where, like, they're taking a really good quality, and it's just not, and it was funny, I was talking with the mom, and I'm like, come on in, and I'm just like, so you could go find places to volunteer, elderly home, children's, like, never thought about that. But put that compassion, don't ignore that, because that's a spark as far as I'm concerned. And then finally, I would say a feeling of surprise mingled with admiration. This is where wonder or awe come into play, such as space or Grand Canyon. So those are kind of the big flavors. The other part of value, or if you don't have things that matter to you, we see lack of motivation. We want to say it's depression. There's lots of ways you can frame it, but if nothing is important to you, you are not motivated to do anything. outside of trying to stimulate that pleasure sensation. And that's where drugs come into play, because we know that pleasure sensation is dopamine, and drugs hit on dopamine. Some of the riskier behaviors hit on dopamine. You know, it sends an adrenaline rush. And so it's just a lack of motivation for things if you don't have things that matter to you. You know, and you go down this list, and this is all taken from the book Sparks by Peter Benson. Sparks can ignite a lifelong vocation or career. I mean, even I look back at high school, and why is everyone talking to me? You know, like just kept, and what it was is that I didn't tell anybody else. I had like zero desire to gossip, right? And so I was like the safe place to talk. And my family was reasonably stable, so I gave them reasonable answers, kind of thing. But like the people around me knew something about me before I knew it, because I didn't choose to go into counseling until, you know, into college somewhere. It was not the initial aspiration. They keep us on a positive path. So if you're motivated by something, you know, you avoid other things. And this has been proven genetically. What we're interested in, we put our attention to. And so if you have nothing that interests you, where does your attention go? It may as well be distracted by TikTok and just overwhelming videos, kind of thing. I was talking to somebody the other day, and one of the bigger challenges with the algorithms they use is, they keep kicking videos up to you, like something you've selected. All right, so you always have something right there ready to go, but they tend to, whatever you've chosen, they go to the extremes of that, like to grab your attention again, like it's just designed to know that if you just see the same cats, you're going to get bored and you're going to go somewhere else, but we'll show you the next extreme level of cat. So whatever you go into, so like they did a study at one point, and like, I don't know, maybe you click on 2 Trump talks, and then half an hour later, if you were to just keep clicking, what would play next? You're literally in white supremacist information. I mean, but that is how like YouTube is set up, is to just go to the next extreme one. So a kid shows some interest in, I don't know, K-pop. All right, you go into K-pop, you're going to end up at the extreme of both manga and non-binary kind of things very quickly, quite frankly. And all you did was go to look up K-pop, and then just kept following the chain that was put up in front of you. So finding things that really matter to you, keep you on a positive path. And at this point, I am just kind of walking through the packet, and we're on the second page now. I love this advice. I don't know who Tom Kiefer is, apparently, but he's been asked, and what do you think it takes to be a great parent? Find your child's passion and do everything you can to support it. And then always try to find a way to say yes. That one's harder. You know, I'm at this point, like we were talking for somebody who came in, like I have 4 kids. I feel like I say no all the time. Like I am literally just trying to stop the next fire or explosion. And so I'm looking for ways to say yes. All right. So if we accept that this sparks is this inner drive and moving towards something, the studies they did on it, youth with sparks who also have several people who know and support socially competent, are more likely to be healthy physically, more likely to volunteer and help other people, more likely to be good stewards of the earth and its resources, more likely to have a sense of purpose, are more likely to report that I am the road to a hopeful future, are less likely to experience depression, are less likely to engage in acts of violence towards others. That list alone should make it kind of worth it to think about it and see if you can help it. I don't want to keep going. So flip into page 3. I kind of went off the deep end, the existentialism and the hopelessness, but these are the three pathways that most adolescents kind of go through. Can be forgotten or left behind. This talks about poverty, abusive families, or cultures of crime. I would argue that any mental health challenges would also fit into that category. So if anybody's struggling with something, they are more vulnerable to risks. And as popular as it is to talk about mental health, there isn't societal level ways to support it. So schools are trying, and I would actually argue like Olathe is trying very, very hard, and I don't know that they still had a school shooting in the last month, you know? So another pathway is one of boredom or sliding by. Well-known social scientist, How Youth Are Faring, comes to this conclusion: a surprising number of youth appear to be bored, unmotivated, and unexcited about their lives. They communicate the in-way boredom of being trapped in the present, waiting for someone to prove that their life is worth living. Many youth do their schoolwork, comply, hang out with their friends, and get through the day, but are not invested in paths into the future that excite them or feel like they originate from within. You know, this could look like a pretty successful young person who just doesn't have anything passions. They can go to college. Like, what do I do? Well, I'm going to get a business major. Why? Because I can make some money. You know, like, you know, I would argue that pathway ends up like going towards the midlife crisis kind of thing, because you eventually figure out it doesn't have as much depth as you thought it did. And then the third pathway is one where the youth is purposeful about their future, take advantage of the challenges and opportunities, and motivated and on a road to a hopeful future. Any questions on that? Because I've got an activity for you after this. But in Sparks Champion, it's not just parents. You have to put them in places where other people and other adults can support it. And so in like my daughter's life, she likes arts and creativity. She's 11. She has her own style, and really if she was left to her druthers, that's the only style she wants, right? And she just wants to work on that. That's really not what supporting it is, because that's supporting what she wants, but she needs to know that there are other mediums and that there are other paths. Like, she needs a wider view of the world before she narrows in that strictly. So, but putting her in places where there's other adults that are good at it, gets her support, and she loves it, and other young people that are doing that same kind of thing. So again, the bottom of that page, different flavors of Sparks. Did I leave any gap for questions? Were there any questions? Okay, so they're different flavors: something we're good at, something we care deeply about, a quality that we know is special, a feeling of wonder, surprise, mingled with admiration. So if you turn the next page, you should be fairly overwhelmed. So they did the research and they looked, and I think it's 33 categories and 200 and something actual things underneath those categories that were meaningful sparks in young people. And so part of what I want you to do is just like circle, what does my kid have talent in this area, or shown any interest whatsoever in this area? Or at some point, I'm going to do this with young people, and like, are we even willing to find out more about it? Just interested enough to find a little bit more about it. And so giving them that option. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes and a pen, and just like check the ones you know have been tried at least. Like, if it's a failure, you can exit out. Like, that one didn't work, but that's still knowledge better than trying nothing. And so I want to give you a couple minutes to you can think about yourself, you can put your own initials there, think about your young person, and just like, which ones of these, or maybe in the case of like drums, which one am I capable of handling in my own house? Teresa, I just put you together with your kid.
Oh.
Sorry.
Go back a little bit.
It just escaped me. Part of this is also just to give you like even just talking about what each one of these is with your young, like, does that jump up and just remotely interest them, you know? Can you even set up a situation? So we're dragging my daughter to Broadway shows now. Not actually dragging her, she's enjoying it so far, but, you know, we're just trying to expose her to some things. And so what can you expose your kid to even get them to think about some of these areas? On the very back, just real quick, I've added this because when I really looked at, when you get down to it, and if there is a lack of faith that is leading to despair, you know, if you can find something that really matters, you know, it will help move you through it. But wonder and awe, there's just some pretty good literature base at this point on just that concept of that there is something bigger than me actually is really helpful to almost everyone. And so thinking about that and you know, it's a reason, I mean, like, we're going to plan our vacations around some of the world wonders, at least the country's wonders. So last year was Grand Canyon, and this year's Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse and that kind of stuff, just to let my kids see something that's bigger than all of us. And just kind of like, how do we put in that beauty-based awe in their place? I grew up in a lake house, luckily lived on a lake house in this small town down in southern Missouri. And I got older and I'm like, why do I like art as much as I do? We didn't go to art. I mean, we didn't go to that kind of stuff. And I'm like, our back window, like we had this huge picture window in our kitchen, literally looked over a huge hillside of like evergreens over the lake. So I had cliffs, I had lake, and then it changed with every season. So it looked different, and I'm like, yeah, I like the way light plates off the things. I like the changing of the seasons and how that looks. And I literally had this huge picture that was artful, as far as I'm concerned, most of my childhood. And it turned into, I like art. I visit museums every chance I get. So Any questions or thoughts about that? I am still figuring out how to put this out there in front of young people and in front of parents, but I do just think we miss this, especially if we're just trying to solve problems all day.
Yeah, I think it's an easy way for especially the young people to self-reflect, but like even as we were doing the things for our daughter, you could see where they were clumped together. So that starts to show that light on that passion and where you're at on that and be proud of that.
Mhm.
So I think how this could be a really very elementary reflection, if you will. It's very easy the way it's laid out. You just kind of fly through it and you're like, music's definitely not her, right? Cars aren't her. But man, plants and family and friends and relationships, that's all her. And so that's neat. And I think that it would be a positive reflection. It doesn't pull them down. It lifts them up.
Mhm.
That's a good one.
Cool. It took a little bit to get that format right. This, of course, just comes in a big list of numbers from them.
Oh yeah, no, you did good laying it out.
So, trying to decide if I need to make a card deck out of it. I'm a big fan of my card decks. Shuffle them around, mix them up, put them down. Any other thoughts or questions? Other than that,
No, the card deck thing would be cool too. You know, we haven't had the bandwidth to kind of gather over your cards, but this last week we did, and it was really beneficial. And I want to incorporate that going forward.
Mhm.
You know, at first it was overwhelming with her commute and just the emotions and everything, so we had to time it right. But when we sat down as a family and did them, I think we started recognizing ways that we were missing loving one another and filling one another's love buckets. And it was so easy to do over those. And so also this, and you know, you could just visit them occasionally with your kiddo and say, you know, what about, then lean in, what about that do you like? And then you're starting to listen and you're spending time and you're affirming their feelings.
and you're learning something new.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like my daughter doesn't even know what improv is, but she really would love to be able to tell jokes. So we're gonna, you know, next fall we'll probably throw her into some kind of improv class. And honestly, that's one of those practical recommendations I think all your kids would benefit. If they're in this program at all, an improv class. So like Laurel just needs to get some inner confidence. I mean, because she knows what to do. That letter she wrote was kind of amazing.